Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. There have been many colorful, bold, and exciting personalities in the history of reggae music over the past 6 decades. But honestly, I can't think of anyone as impactful and ubiquitous as the maverick legend that was the great Bonnie Lee. Simply among the greatest producers to ever walk the earth. Not many men can boast of being dub reggae's first promoters, producing what was one of reggae's first ever songs, breaking the hold and monopoly of Coxsone Dodd and Duke Reid on Jamaica's music industry, or being the pioneer of the practice of reusing the same brilliant rhythms for different artists. Not to mention the insane number of smash hits which he produced in his heyday. If we think of a man that never shied away from controversy, he was that guy. Whether it was producing songs with extremely naughty lyrics like Max Romeo's Wet Dream, or instigating and promoting feuds between artists, Bonnie Lee did it all to great commercial results and enriched that culture in a very massive way. His exploits earned him the nickname of Striker because once he aimed, he never missed. With an incredible run that began in the 60s, he was a quintessential music industry guy, always ahead of the curve, and as a leader of what was the second generation of Jamaica's elite producers, he would help shape reggae than any other single person would do. And he achieved all of this without owning a studio of his own. Let's take a look at the life and times of Bonnie Striker Lee, the ultimate hitmaker. He was born Edward Lee on August 23, 1941, and grew up in the gritty streets of the Greenwich Farm area of West Kingston to a shoemaker father and housewife mother. As he came of age at the beginning of the 60s, Jamaica's music industry was just taking off. He had studied electrical engineering at Kingston's Technical College, but was a great dancer and had an unquenchable love for music. And eventually, he was given an opportunity through his eventual brother-in-law in the famous singer Derek Morgan, who was married to his younger sister. Morgan had recorded for and was close to producer Duke Reid of Treasure Isle Records and recommended Lee to him to take up a job as record plugger, or in simple terms, someone who pushes new records to radio stations to get them played. He took up this role for Treasure Isle Studios in 1962 and was really good at it due to his outgoing personality and street smarts. He was so effective at this job that producer Leslie Kong also hired him to do the same for his Beverly's record label. And through his efforts, a then 14-year-old Jimmy Cliff's debut single, Hurricane Hattie, would go to number 1 in Jamaica's charts. Bonnie Lee had an amazing ear for good music and fell in love with the science and arts of production. He soon moved over to work for producer Ken Lack at his Carlton label, and within a few years got the chance to produce an artist by himself. He was flat broke, but was given free studio time by producer Duke Reid, and with that, produced his first record in 1967 that was called Listen to the Beat by Lloyd Jackson and the Groovers. He only had $20 in his pockets, which was barely enough to pay the instrumentalists. But that gamble paid off, as the second song produced in that session, that was called Music Field by singer Roy Shirley, became a massive hit in Jamaica, and that success became his launchpad. Around that time, he met singer Slim Smith, who had just parted ways with Coxsone Dodd Studio One, and seeing his exploits with his former group The Techniques, Lee would build a new group around him that became known as the Uniques, and that group became an instant success, and they opened their account in the charts with the smash hits Let Me Go Girl and People's Rocksteady. And though the Uniques broke up a year later, he kept working with Slim Smith and produced many of his songs in those times, including the rocksteady masterpiece My Conversation. Bonnie Lee was suddenly in high demand and would produce songs for tons of artists and scored smash hits for the likes of Derek Morgan in 1968 with the song Hold You Jack, as well as Bangarang for Lester Sterling and singer Stranger Cole, a song credited as being among the first reggae songs ever recorded. But his biggest song of that year was yet to come. In those times, legendary singer Max Romeo worked for Lee as a songwriter and penned a song called Wet Dream that he felt would go well with instrumentals for Derek Morgan's Hold You Jack. But the lyrics were extremely naughty, and when Derek Morgan and Slim Smith declined to sing it, he forced Max Romeo to voice the song. Bonnie Lee was what you would call a suitcase producer with no studio of his own, and took Max to Studio One to record it. When Coxsone Dodd heard the lyrics, he was reluctant to allow them record it in his studio, but backed down after pushback from Lee. Upon release, it became a mega hit in Jamaica and also a sensation in the UK, where it stayed in the charts for almost 6 months and reached number 10 despite it being banned by the BBC. His exploits saw him travel to London in that year at the invitation of Chris Blackwell to seal a licensing deal that saw Lee's productions get released on the then newly formed Trojan Records, and saw his music get major exposure in that country. And he achieved all this while still an itinerant producer working from studio to studio, and would in those times collaborate with Lee Scratch Perry and Clancy Eccles, who were also freelancers or suitcase producers. Around that time, he took a young producer called Winston Holness under his wing that became known later as Nine the Observer. But when Nine parted ways with Lee and joined forces with Coxsone Dodd, it was Spark a Beef that saw Lee and Perry co-produce a Bob Marley song and diss track named Mr. Chatterbox that took shots at Nine. Bunny Lee and Perry became close collaborators and even worked together on the experimental Upsetters classic In Return of Django. And he would end the 60s as one of Jamaica's hottest producers and enter the 70s in similar blazing fashion. He would produce monster hits like John Holt's Stick By Me, Cherry Oh Baby by Eric Donaldson, and Delroy Wilson's Better Must Come. Before 1971 was done, Bunny Lee had become a huge fan of sound system owner and electronic wizard King Tubby. Tubby had pioneered a new sound that involved adding echoes and reverbs to instrumental verses of songs. Bunny Lee began to stay close to Tubby and was interested in exploring this innovation. He helped Tubby acquire an old 4-track mixing console from Dynamic Sound Studios that Tubby would use with devastating effects to create mind-blowing features like fading out vocals, strengthening bass lines, as well as hand claps, explosions, and echoes. This sound became the powerful subgenre that we know today as dub reggae. Bunny Lee was simply a genius in crafting hit songs, as well as putting winning teams together, and formed one of the all-time great studio backing bands in the Aggrovators in 1974. An elite lineup which had legends like Sly and Robbie, Santa Davis, Keith Sterling, and so many more, became the explosive outlet for Lee's vision of King Tubby's dub creations. The 70s saw Jamaica descend into political violence, and after getting hit one day by a stray bullet in the streets, Lee would embark on a personal crusade to drag as many Kingston youth as possible up the streets and into the music business. And one beneficiary of this scheme was the eventual dancehall producer Henry John Joe Laws. In addition to his many gifts, he was a genius in using feuds between artists to stir up buzz and also generate large sales figures. In 1975, he would instigate and promote an epic back and forth between Prince Jasbo and Derek Morgan on one side and Ace DJ Iroy on the other. In the end, Iroy won the battle, but Lee was the one that smiled to the bank. So the second half of the 70s saw the ever-evolving Bunny Lee embrace the rising wave of new dancehall artists, and he would craft breakout debut hits for then young guns like Linval Thompson and Leroy Smart, as well as the smash hits Step It Up Youth Man that launched Barry Brown into the limelight. And it also helped veterans like Owen Gray make a phenomenal comeback when he produced Gray's monster hits Natty Bongo. And by the end of the 1970s, Lee had recorded thousands of songs and would end that decade as the most prolific producer of that epoch, despite not having a studio of his own. However, King Tubby opened his own studio before the decade was done and became heavily occupied with his own projects. And as the collaboration would decline in quantity, so also would Lee's output of music. And another strong factor that reduced his dominance was the emergence of the Hookin Brothers Channel 1 studios, an outfit with state-of-the-art equipment like a 16-track console that was the first of its kind in Jamaica. Sensing that the tide was changing, he would buy Joe Gibbs' studio at the start of the 80s and began to slow into the elder statesman's role of studio owner. But he would still put in significant work over the years and is credited with producing Beanie Man's debut album in 1983. And Bunny Lee revealed in an interview some years ago that he lost interest in the music business at the beginning of the 1980s when he discovered that big-time drug dealers were going into the business in a mad rush for profit and not for the love of the music. He would put out his own compilations featuring various artists deep into the 2000s and also produced a slew of awesome dub albums. In recognition of his incredible achievements, he was awarded the Order of Distinction by Jamaica's government in 2008. And in the year 2020, he produced his last project that was called Sly and Robbie vs. Roots Radix, and passed away not long after, in October that year, at the age of 79 due to heart failure. It will take me a whole day to talk about all the things this great man did in his almost 6-decade career. A pillar and icon like no other, tough as nails, passionate about music, and a genius at what he did. Traits that made him one of the greatest figures in Jamaican entertainment history, and definitely among the greatest producers to ever emerge from the island. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.